podcast. Um, Welcome back. This is episode 3 now.
Yeah,
We're really rolling now.
we are.
As a reminder, my name is Gary J. Nix. I'm the co-host, and my other co-host is
And I am Amber Chenevert.
yes. We're here today to discuss the culture of future proofing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, in case y'all have not been here before, we have our segments. We have everything ready to go. And let's just jump into the conversation. But before we do, actually, just as a reminder, please subscribe, rate, give us 5 stars. We're here for y'all, okay?
That's
This is
right.
what we're here for. So give us the 5 stars so that more people can get some of this
Can
knowledge that
find
we're
us.
gonna, find us, get some of this knowledge that we're sharing. We business, we culture, we all things. So,
That's right.
let's get into this future proofing stuff. Let's start off with rising above the noise.
Yeah, so from the perspective of the topic, of course, you all know we always like to start with a little bit of attention. So when we're thinking about future proofing, we're specifically looking at future proofing your brand. And what does that mean? And so right now we know that there is a significant tension between that need for short-term wins and then long-term uh, impact, long-term success, which often includes growth related to your growth consumer or your growth customer. Um, but not just in the turbulent marketplace that we're in. I think probably for the last like 10 years or so, it's really been about, those short-term wins, those quarterly goals that you need to hit, particularly for, publicly traded companies, like really making sure that they're having that immediate impact. But what could potentially be lost in the sauce related to how those sort of chasing what that short term win is. How does that impact your relationship with your customer long term? And then how does that impact the culture of your company, the culture of your business, the culture of your brand? When you could potentially be sort of waving in the wind,
Mhm.
over grounding yourself and being rooted.
Right. And it's always interesting to me about the fact that uh, those companies out there that keep talking about the short term wins. And
Mhm,
yes, of course, there is something to be said about um, a summation of small wins
mhm,
equaling a larger one.
okay.
But when you're talking about short term wins and then you're talking about future proofing
Mhm.
and you don't hit that long term part or you don't fully seem to acknowledge it or seem to really look at it, it comes off as very weird to me.
It does, and here where but then the question is, where does the weirdness lie? And the weirdness could lie in that in order to try to get that short-term win, you find yourself or you find your brand hopping onto some particular trend where they don't belong. And then your customer is like, "What happened? What happened? Where did you go? I don't understand what's going on." And so sometimes whatever you might think could be that short-term win because you don't have that engagement or that understanding of your customer, what you think could be a short-term win ends up being like a long-term loser.
Right. And this is one of those conversations that really puts us into the heart of where this podcast came from in the first place.
Mhm.
You know, um, so many discussions I've had in my career when I bring up culture, they think I'm talking about company culture. And it's
Mhm.
not that I'm
Mhm.
not, but that's not where my focus is.
Right.
Because once again, how do you make the money? You get it from the people.
Mhm.
How is the easier way to get the money? Instead of selling to someone, getting them to throw their money at you. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
So understanding, it feels like marketing 101 again, understanding who your target consumer is. But how do you understand that? You understand their culture, right? And the best companies, their cultures reflect the culture of their consumers. Or at
Right.
least they try, right?
Mhm.
So hope that's not the spoiler alert, because then I guess this entire podcast is a spoiler alert, or the name of the podcast is a spoiler alert. But you bring up the point about companies who jump on a so-called trend
Mhm.
because that's the way that they think is the easiest, or sometimes they may even think is the best way to connect with someone, but they don't know if they're actually connecting with someone.
Right, and I mean, I have to also just because we have that college teaching experience, I gotta go back to the textbook a little bit. The marketing textbooks do tell you, or they do train you, that you have to be up on trends, and you have to be up on the latest and greatest in order to make sure that you can connect with your customer. But I think the push and pull that we even have where I work and just, talking to friends and folks in the business is that not every trend, as I said before, is for you. But then how do you decide what's for you? Like, one of the questions that I'm always asking clients is what matters in culture to the people that you are trying to inspire the most,
Mhm.
you know? And whatever is most viral in the moment is not necessarily the thing that's most important to your customer, right?
Right.
So there is, of course, going back to that tension of sort of short-term gains, so short-term wins versus long-term gains. Short-term wins can be had with your tried and true customer, as well as long-term gains. But in our world, there's certain like practices and procedures that you do in order to begin to start to navigate what those short-term wins look like. And sort of what channels do you use as a result? And how do people, they're your customer, begin to see themselves in both?
Mhm.
So there's certain ways in which you can use social media, for example, for that short-term win, certain influencers, etc., as long as they're attached to your brand values, who you are, so that can still be connected to a long-term win or a long-term engagement. Because as you said before, it's like stacking the chips. That's
Mhm.
a strategy too. That short stacking of wins can impact a long-term
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, and I think I wanna go back just, a little bit to that textbook kinda
Okay.
definition, right?
Yes.
Um, because I think it also just illustrates what you were just talking about, because
Mhm.
now let's just go backwards again to go forwards again.
Yeah.
And the lesson to stay up to date with the latest and greatest,
Mhm.
because that's how you stay relevant,
Mhm.
right? But what's missing from that definition is context,
Mhm.
right? And this is a
Mhm.
brief shout out for this shirt right here. Let me say, okay, this is one of the shirts. This is merch. This is the culture of merch. Yes. What is
Yes.
culture
Get the
without
merch.
context? We are here. You can buy it. It's on the site, thecultureofpod.com/store. Remember that. Anyway,
Mhm.
but the question is, what is culture without context?
Mhm.
I think that, or I know based on a lot of my experiences, the people inside the companies, they are concerned about their job as they should be.
Yeah. As everyone is right now, right?
Right. But even in good times, there's still that concern,
Mhm.
right? It's more top of mind right now, but it's still always surface level, if
Yeah.
not super duper top of mind. And you have numbers that you have to hit, and you
Mhm.
want to hit those.
Mhm.
At the same time, those numbers also have to lead to something in the future. That has to lead to um, what your success is going to be past that short term moment. And another thing that I have noticed, especially with large legacy, global, multi-billion-dollar brands,
Mhm.
sometimes in that hurry to hit those numbers, they forget about certain things that got them there.
Hmm.
They forget about certain adages or certain passages or just certain things that founders or early workers there
Mhm.
have actually said that led them to, or in part led them to where they are right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
You know, um, and I wonder what the how can we? decode that fear even more for
Mhm.
listeners and watchers, right? It's I think that talking about that moment and going deeper, going longer
Mhm.
is where some of that fix can be found, because we talked about the channels, we talked about the paths of communication, but at the same time we're strategists,
Mhm.
and what we do is to help inform the paths that are chosen. What we do is help to give reason to the messaging that's created. And I feel like when it's done well and everyone's on board,
Mhm.
everyone feels a little bit better. They feel some ease. They
Yeah.
feel more involved. They feel um, like they have something more to do, that they have a certain dependency that they can be proud of
Yeah.
in moments like that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the pride comes in being clear and confident about who you are as a brand,
Hmm.
um, and how that knowledge, to your earlier point, is connected to the customer and at the heart of who they are. When you know that that intersection is really happening from the perspective of how you present yourself, whether it's short term or it's long term, when it goes into the marketplace, you're going to feel good about it, right? You're
Hmm.
not going to be as concerned. You're not going to be as worried. Sure, you still might not hit the numbers exactly the way that you want to, but you don't think that you're putting anything out there that's going to be too far off of who you are or who you want to be. I think we can get a little iffy when we have identified potentially a growth audience that is perhaps not as in line with
Hmm.
the brand values, what the brand can actually support, um, in this effort to chase the new and the next, right?
Hmm.
But sometimes there could be a disconnect. Like, again, just because you see a trend in the marketplace, even if it looks or feels like it could be a growth opportunity from a customer perspective, there's opportunity cost there and there's attention there too. If the growth audience is too far away from the current customer you have that already loves you, that's really aligned to your values and baked in, you running off to try to chase um, a, a pretty far away group that looks or seems like it could be a growth audience, in the end, it potentially might not be a growth audience for you
Hmm.
because you've gone so far away, you've abandoned, to your earlier point, people have helped you get to your success. So there's always that balance, but it's always a checking in. Because we're strategists, I always have to emphasize this is why we have to keep checking in with our real human customers, to see where they are, to see how values have tilted or changed. Because even though you know your customer and you know the relationship they have with your brand, you know, uh, things that are happening in the marketplace that you have no control over
Hmm.
could be impacting their relationship with your brand. And you have an opportunity to potentially respond to that in the short term, but also recognize that that can have really long term impacts. And are you ready for that? And is that built into your plan?
Yeah. Um, Another thing that just came to mind about future proofing,
Hmm.
or adjacent to future proofing, for the longest time, basically forever, a lot of how we target has been based on demographic information.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I would think about is what happens when a consumer that is presently in your target demographic ages out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Thinking about the future, because time doesn't stop,
Mm-hmm.
but people age,
Mm-hmm.
people change,
Mm-hmm.
and your brand values may not evolve at the same rate as your consumers, which in and of itself doesn't have to be a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's something that you need to dig deeper into,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we'll do some of that in Deconstructed. But when thinking about future proofing, once again, it's about what's happening next. How are people evolving? How is your brand evolving? How is your product
Mm-hmm.
evolving? How does change, which is the only constant really, how does that affect everything that you're doing? And how does that affect how you feel about what you need to do
Mm-hmm.
to keep hitting those numbers that you need to hit?
Yeah. I, I would say that part of staying in touch means that you're doing consistent segmentation research
Mm-hmm.
with real human people.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you might find is that, your brand values don't necessarily have to change to uh, grow in order for you to grow in the marketplace with new customers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding that who and who might be the most interested in your brand and what you have to offer, that could change.
Right.
And then what that means for the life cycle of your brand, that could mean that you might have to, do a refresh on how you present yourself in the marketplace
With reason.
with reason, right? You might have to have a new story to tell for how your audience is newly reflected to you based
Mm-hmm.
on the research that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other alternative is similar to like what I said earlier, which is you might find you have a new audience coming up that doesn't even know who you are.
Right.
And so sometimes that's not about a refresh. That's introducing yourself to that new audience, shaking their hand, saying welcome in,
Mm-hmm.
and creating space for that group. So it depends on where you are from a business perspective, but then also aligning that with your customer. Because in that way, you're keeping in touch, you're understanding, how your audience is evolving, where you have a new opportunity with folks who don't know you at all. And then what does that mean for your conversation? Does that mean a refresh on your part in the marketplace? Or does that mean you just need to introduce yourself as you are to a new group?
Yeah. And I think that's another constant that we don't talk about that much, or even when we talk about it, because I know I've said as a marketer, sometimes marketers will overcorrect
Mm-hmm.
due to the pressures that we can be under,
Yes.
right? There's still some dissonance around understanding the value of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a fact that you cannot succeed without it, right?
Right. Yes. And okay, keep going. Because I was going to go another place, but I want to stay on
but
topic.
but I think that there is there's a point of balance between the need to continue to acquire customers
Mm-hmm.
rather than the activity that can drive constant acquisition of new customers, right? In the ways in which you take care of your consumers
Mm-hmm.
and you continue to show that and you continue to connect with them. So, one, they can speak very highly of you,
Mm-hmm.
because that's another introduction point,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that's a way to future proof your bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you keep having people with kind of getting those warm leads, getting people who are are interested in you based off of someone that they know and trust.
Mhm.
So they're going to look into you, or they're more likely to look into you a little deeper, or potentially give you more areas of grace,
Yes.
right? Being able to have a better introductory conversation,
Mhm.
that's going to help future proof your bottom line.
Mhm.
Um, Understanding where you fit within society and culture, and being able to stake your claim in where you fit and how you're part of everything without trying to own it. That's another, because we like to talk about ownership in this industry as well. And it's like, I get it, but let's calm down.
Right, because no one can own culture. I don't
Right.
care what anybody says.
Right.
Nobody owns culture
Correct.
because the humans create culture constantly. And when you think you have your finger on the pulse of something, it moves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Um because humans create culture in order to adapt to their environments.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening all the time. And so often people are creating culture to adapt in environments that don't necessarily prioritize them or want them. And then somebody else decides, oh, look at what they're doing over there. That's cool. Let's attach ourselves to that. As a brand, that might not be your place.
Right.
It might be your place to give it a stage, to invest in it, to support it, to give it space. But those folks who created that culture, they can also let you know. But then that goes back to the value of research instead. Excuse me, as well. And so when it comes to future proofing the bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
um, that again is staying in staying on pace with your actual customer and where they're going, what matters to them, what's important to them. Um, and making sure that you're including that in your strategic plans
Right.
because there is a type of research that can be done that sets you up for the right now and for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different methods that you can engage in that are both quant and qual, um, that are different activities that can help bring that fresh insight in so you can even start to understand for yourself what's important for the right now, what's important for the future. And having the data to support that helps you when you're going to have those bigger conversations with leaders about budget, etc., because you can definitely say, here's the now, here's where it's headed. And I definitely know that that can just be really scary, particularly right now because the marketplace is so volatile.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have to let the data and the research be your sword and shield because nobody else is going to be doing that work except the marketer who's in charge of it or the advertising person who's in charge of it. And you have an obligation to be the calm in the storm as a result of that. But it's going to be difficult to do that without the data to back it up.
Yeah, and also just the ability to understand what the data means in the
Yeah.
space. It's um so much of this, because of the depth, can sound like it takes a whole lot of time.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be something that in and of itself takes months. There's always going to be parts that are going to be longer tail and shorter tail.
Mhm.
That's just how
Mhm.
life works. That's just how business works.
Mhm.
Always has been, always will be.
Mhm.
But speeding up the process for the sake of speeding up the process is always going to be an issue.
Mhm.
Um, Thinking about going back to the channels for a quick second, thinking about how channels built through technology have scrambled people's brains a little bit and
Mhm.
saying, well, this is the thing that I need to do
Mhm.
without understanding the details
Mhm.
of how it needs to be done
Mhm.
and the why.
Mhm.
Right. I think about social not only because I've done a lot of work in the space, but also just as a way of connection and how it's really turned into digital in home or
Yeah.
digital on phone
Mhm.
or digital everywhere you are.
Mhm.
It's a new paradigm of out of home the way it's being used so
Yeah.
often, which I would say has led to or has contributed to a lot of the algorithmic issues we have on these channels. But that's a conversation for another day.
It is. But to your point of, social and, like, sort of that real time brand
Mhm.
engagement, and then getting back and also relating to our conversation about the short term versus long term win, there's a real opportunity now more than ever to really focus on testing,
Mhm.
because in testing, we can understand what's happening immediately and then what can also scale, um, and really get some real time feedback about how those things are working. And I think sometimes brand partners can be a little iffy about testing, particularly if they don't have a real grounded space in retail, for example,
Mhm.
which sort of allows for that total experience, if you will, um, from digital to in person. But I still think even for digital products, that testing can go so far because sometimes when we say research, people see that as a scary thing. But when we talk about testing, a lot of times people don't think about that as research. You're
Right.
still collecting data. You're
Mhm.
still collecting information about your customer. You're learning about, what is impacting them and what's not. And I would suggest to any advertiser, any marketer, that whenever you set a research agenda for the year as part of your planning, like, understand that those little tests count as part of that agenda,
Mhm.
and that should be grounded in both the short-term needs and also the long-term ones.
Yeah. So I just feel like another interesting thing happened in this conversation, uh, in part based off of or based on my experience listening to podcasts and being a guest on
Mhm.
podcasts. There's always something that is partially theoretical about strategy work,
Yes.
right? Because you have to start from somewhere.
Mhm.
And I don't think I thought about this just because you brought up testing, because testing is important as well. Research and everything is important. But
Mhm.
I think this conversation has gone from the idea of what a brand is, how it's often perceived, as the company, as the product or the service, what we're talking about, which is what I believe a brand should be. It's an activity, it's a promise, it's a set of actions that prove who you are,
Mhm.
in part based on what you say
Mhm.
and also how you're perceived.
Mhm.
And the best successes are found or are where the perception and what you're doing actually meet. Because I don't think that a brand belongs to consumers. I
Mhm.
think they have to sign off. I think that they have a huge contribution to what the brand is, but I think that's an overcorrection from the brand or the company, the business, just defining what the brand is, because it is their job, as they put it, is to serve their consumer with whatever their product or service is.
Mhm.
So it's a symbiotic relationship in which you need to connect. And now you're thinking of ideas, and you're thinking about how the stories need to be told. So now you're going from like theory to concept to story. And while you're doing that, you're doing researching, you're doing testing, you're observing what's going on, and now you're into uh, the process of application,
Yeah.
because all a process and every single step matters.
Mhm.
Excuse me, in that process. You need to hit all of those points, and one point doesn't really stop.
Mhm.
It might pause for a bit, but it never stops. And I'm wondering if that can feel intimidating to people, or if they jump to that this doesn't stop. How do I fix this thing? How do I solve this thing when it's a bunch of small solutions, a larger solution that's going to lead to another set of small solutions. When I was at RGA, there was this visualization we'd have, especially for social, and it'd be like moment, 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 tent pole moment, 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 tent pole moment.
Mhm.
And I feel like it illustrates. It's a good basic principle type of illustration of how things go,
Mhm.
because you're always going to have those peaks and valleys
Mhm.
in business, and in terms of how people feel about your brand.
Mhm.
When you have that in a good space and you can sustain that, then the more technical problems, supply chain, sales, all the other stuff that CFOs tend to really concentrate on,
Mhm.
you can focus on those from that standpoint, because everything around it is actually better. It's in a good space. So now we're back to 101, supply and demand,
Mhm.
right? How do we make sure we do that? How do we make sure we do that right?
Mhm.
Because any sort of failure there is a completely different failure than a brand failure.
Yes.
But it's easier to fix that problem than it is to fix a brand problem.
Absolutely. That's like, it being easier to sort of make a correction than to correct the story that's already being told.
Right.
That could be catching fire. That's not necessarily positive.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we're gonna. I think we even talked about the vibes. You know,
Mhm.
there might be some background noise and the vibes of today, just recording day. But hey, that's what happens when you record in New York. You have two New Yorkers here, okay?
Right.
That's what's gonna happen. It's the
Well,
ambiance of the city, okay?
listen, I live here. I live in New York. I love New York, but I will always claim that I'm from North Carolina.
Okay.
I don't want any trouble.
Okay. Well, listen. I am born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. I am New York City, okay?
Mhm.
That's what this is. But I think that I think this was a good place to kind of close out this part of the conversation. I still want to go deeper on some of the things,
Mhm.
because I think that there is room to talk more about future proofing and kind of address some of the other things around future proofing, like, innovation and
Yeah.
being new. The how we conflate words that feel futuristic with future proofing,
Correct.
and that's not necessarily how it should be
No,
viewed.
it's not. We have to be very careful about catchphrases and thinking that that is going to be the end all be all of our short term and long term growth. Um, it's all about making sure that, again, we know who we are, we know what we stand for, we know as a result who's our best and right customer.
Mhm.
And then, of course, what really matters to them and how do we understand them to get through those peaks and valleys and then be able to get some sense of what that looks like over time, be able to model that so that we can build a strategy along for the long term that helps us immediately and in perpetuity.
Right. I also just want to point out the fact that you said you don't want any smoke, and then you said that we have to watch out for catchphrases in this industry. But I mean, you're not wrong, but I'm just saying.
You got me.
But for now, we're gonna wrap up this episode 3, The Culture of Futureproofing. Once again, subscribe, um, give us 5 stars, like us, comment. Also, look for our Patreon because our paid patrons will be able to see the rest of the discussion on Deconstructed because that's where we go deeper. That's where we have even more conversation. That's where we might reveal some secrets. And it only starts at $6 a month. All you gotta do, patreon.com/thecultureofpod. Simple. Support us. Help us just create this thing. We'll shout you out. We'll let it be known who helped us because that's what you do in community. Okay? But until then, we will see you on the next episode of The Culture of.